Yippee, here we go. For a starter, no apologies, but welcome to our information session, Morena Koto. And as I say, welcome to this information session. Before we start, a reminder that this workshop is being live streamed. However, while this workshop is open to the public, it is for staff to provide guidance to elected members. It is not a forum for debate or decisions. It is also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or bring other matters to the attention of council. If a member of public does want to provide input, please talk to staff and they can help you have your say. So first up, we have the local alcohol policy, the update and the next steps. So welcome and far away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Phil.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you all. Kia ora koutou. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the work being done to consider the need for a local alcohol policy in our district. So we're reporting back today to you on the research and engagement work done last year, which provides the foundation for today's issues and options briefing. When Council considered this in November, members opted to wait until staff reported back on issues and options before deciding the timeframe for this work. And you did decide in November that if we were to undertake an SCP on an LAP, that would be considered by a full Council hearings panel. So next week, you will be asked to decide the timeframe for completing this work. And the purpose of this presentation is to help you make that decision. Next week, we'll be asking council members whether they wish to continue with LAP work to complete this term or whether they wish to pause this work. And a paper outlining the issues and options discussed today will be provided to you as part of your documents for the council meeting next week. So, what have we been doing? Our focus in recent weeks has been analysing the data and findings of the research collated for this project and the insights from our engagement with stakeholders to date. And so this is all about ensuring we've got a clear problem definition based on the data so we can consider what to discuss further with our community. The research we've been analysing includes the results of the Life in Christchurch community survey, and we spoke to you about this before Christmas. That included questions seeking public views on alcohol, and the survey achieved over 5,000 responses. We've also been looking at data on alcohol-related harm provided by the Police and Medical Officer of Health, data on licensing provided by our alcohol licensing team, and at the findings of relevant published studies. So all of this data and research is contained in a research report which will be provided to you following this briefing. As well as all of that research and data, we've been considering insights provided by stakeholders, including representatives of industry with whom the team met before Christmas, and that includes hospitality, supermarkets and bottle stores. We've spoken also and received information from statutory consultees, so that's the police, the medical officer of health and alcohol licensing inspectors. And in addition, staff made presentations to all of the community boards before Christmas as well, and a number of you would have participated in those conversations. So using what we've learnt from our research and engagement, we've identified issues regarding alcohol-related harm in the district, and Tom is going to take us through an overview of these. Based on the issues, we've developed some possible options that may help address them, and Tom will set out those possible options. So it's important to emphasise that these are possible options which we suggest testing with the community. They're not proposals, they're not staff recommendations for an LAP, they're options to test with the community and get that sense of what they support. So I'll hand over to Tom.
Great, thank you. This slide is essentially just a reminder of the scope of what is and out of a local alcohol policy. So the scope of an LAP is limited to matters relating to alcohol licensing, and an LAP cannot consider policies that don't relate to licensing. And so the Sale Supply of Alcohol Act sets out what can be included in an LAP, which is on the screen there for you in green. These are the three main lessons we've learned from our data research and stakeholder engagement. That alcohol-related harm is affecting our communities. Alcohol-related harm may be associated with supervised and unsupervised drinking, and communities want more say on alcohol licensing. I'll briefly run you through each of these, but I just know that this is a snapshot and they are discussed in more depth in the Issues and Options report and the research report that will be provided to you before your meeting next week. The research report is quite comprehensive and substantial document, so we plan to provide it to you, as Elizabeth said, after the session, and we'll also offer drop-in sessions to discuss the research should you want to. So the first box up there is alcohol-related harm is affecting our communities. So some communities are affected more than others. Around 1/3 of alcohol-related incidents attended by the police are in the east of the city, and another third are split out across the central city, the central northwest, which includes Riccarton, Maryvale and Papanui commercial areas. And relatively few incidents happen in the Banks Peninsula. In the Life in Christchurch survey, residents in Burwood, Central, Coastal, Linwood and Riccarton wards were more likely to say that some or most of the various alcohol-related issues occur frequently in their neighbourhood. Those living in communities with higher levels of deprivation are disproportionately affected by alcohol-related harm. So nationally, survey data suggests that those experiencing alcohol-related harm are more likely to live in the more deprived areas than the less deprived areas. In Christchurch, the police attend more alcohol-related incidents in areas of higher deprivation than less deprived areas. People in the most deprived areas of the city are more likely to perceive alcohol and drugs as a big problem compared to those in less deprived areas. The Life in Christchurch survey findings also suggest that those living in wards with higher levels of deprivation are more likely to experience alcohol-related issues in the area and have concerns with various aspects of the current alcohol licensing rules. Our licensing data indicates that there are more on-licensed and off-licensed premises in areas of higher deprivation, and generally they have earlier opening and later closing times. In our early engagement, we've heard concerns about a concentration of premises in deprived areas and the effects that this can have on reducing the price of alcohol and increasing the consumption. In the second box, around alcohol-related harm may be associated with supervised and unsupervised drinking. In theory, the potential for harm is greater when alcohol is purchased from off-licensed premises to drink somewhere else rather than places where alcohol is brought to drink on the premises. On-licensed premises are required to put in place measures to encourage the safe and responsible consumption of alcohol. However, once alcohol has been purchased from an off-licence, there are no controls or supervision of drinking once alcohol is taken away. Our early engagement with stakeholders, such as the police and licensing inspectors, suggests that most concerns are about the availability of alcohol at off-licences. However, there are indications that on-licensed premises may also be associated with alcohol-related harm in the city. Police data shows that much alcohol-related harm occurs late at night and in parts of the city where there is a concentration of hospitality venues, for example in the central city. The Life in Christchurch survey results suggest that some residents have concerns about the harm associated with drinking at some kinds of on-licensed premises, so more generally bars, pubs and nightclubs rather than cafes and restaurants. And the third box is communities want more say on alcohol licensing. So our Life in Christchurch survey tells us that many residents want to have more say about licensed premises in the area. We've heard that communities sometimes feel like they have a limited capacity to participate in decision-making processes for alcohol licence applications. Where there is most agreement is on the need for restrictions on how close a licensed premises can be to community facilities. 75% of Christchurch respondents think such restrictions should apply to bottle stores, and 65% think these restrictions should apply to pubs, bars and nightclubs. And when asked which facilities restrictions should apply to, people most commonly identified early childhood education centres and schools, with nearly 85%, followed by medical and rehabilitation facilities and hospitals, parks, playgrounds and sports facilities, and marae and places of worship. So based on these issues that we've identified, we've developed 6 possible options to test with the community. And once again, these should be viewed as possible options and staff are not proposing or recommending these at this stage. So these policy options aim to address different issues. There is no one single option here that would address all the issues that we've identified. Council could in the future choose to adopt all, some or none of these possible options. We suggest testing them with the community, asking if these or similar should be in a draft local alcohol policy for subsequent consultation. We want to test these with the community because we want to better understand their views before we draft any LAP. We want to work closely with our communities to make sure that any LAP drafted meets Christchurch's particular needs. And so I'll briefly run through these possible options. Option A is reducing trading hours for off licences. So this seeks to restrict the accessibility of alcohol that can be purchased for consumption in unsupervised environments at night. It wouldn't stop people from drinking alcohol that they'd bought earlier, but it would restrict people's ability to make decisions to purchase additional alcohol at night time when they may have already been drinking. Research suggests that reducing the consumption of alcohol is likely to result in a reduction in alcohol-related harm, and research also suggests that reducing trading hours can be an effective way of reducing alcohol-related harm. There is some community support for reducing off-licence trading hours, although the views are mixed. Life in Christchurch survey found that 47% of people thought the hours for bottle stores in their neighbourhood were too long, compared to 45% who thought they were about right. For supermarkets, that was 40% thought they were too long, 54% about right, and for smaller convenience or specialty stores, 49% of people thought their hours were too long, or 44% thought they were about right. If trading hours were reduced to 9 p.m, licensing data indicates that most of the city's off-licence premises would be affected by this option. Currently, only 54 of the 256 off-licence premises hold licence requiring them to close at 9 p.m. We did consider targeting this option to some parts of the city and or to some types of off-licence premises, but it is likely that people would just travel to other areas or buy alcohol from other places. And so for these reasons, we suggest a consistent approach to off-licence trading hours for all types of off-licence premises in the city. Reducing trading hours for off-licences is a relatively common measure for other councils that have implemented an LAP. For example, Auckland, Selwyn and Gisborne all have a 9 p.m. closing time for their off-licences at the moment. Option B would place a temporary freeze on new licence applications in high deprivation areas. This option seeks to address the disproportionate level of alcohol-related harm experienced by high deprivation communities, which was discussed earlier. It aims to prevent further concentration of licensed premises in these areas and mitigates the effect that this can have on lowering prices and increasing access to alcohol. It would not stop people from buying alcohol, but there would be fewer places to buy alcohol from. There appears to be some community support for this approach. Some stakeholders have expressed concerns about the proliferation of off-licences in high deprivation areas. And our Life in Christchurch findings indicate that while communities are broadly comfortable with the number of licensed premises in their neighbourhood, almost 1 in 3 consider there are too many places where alcohol can be purchased and then taken away. And compared to people in other wards, people in Hornby, Linwood and Riccarton wards are more likely to think there are too many places to buy alcohol to take away in those neighbourhoods. Few people would like to see more licensed premises in their neighbourhood other than cafes and restaurants. The freeze could apply to all or some types of licensed premises, and this is a point that we would like to test with the community. Again, other councils have implemented similar measures in their LAPs. For example, Tauranga does not allow any new licences for bottle stores in suburbs with a social deprivation index of 9 or 10, and Auckland City Council has placed a freeze on new off-licences in their central city and 23 other town centres within Auckland. And New Plymouth has a freeze on all new off-licence bottle stores in all areas of their city. Option C restricts new licensed premises from opening within 100 metres of community facilities, and this option responds to the community preferences that licensed premises are not located close to certain sensitive sites, such as schools. The list of the community facilities listed on the slide is similar to the definitions of sensitive sites used by other councils for their local alcohol policies. We consider that the distance of 100 metres reflects a balance between not being too close to these sites, but also ensures that the restriction isn't too expansive. And this is consistent with approaches taken by other councils, which usually specify distances between 50 and 150 metres. So Dunedin, Timaru, New Plymouth all use 100 metres for their policies. Option D. This aims to reduce alcohol-related harm late at night in suburban areas, particularly where there's a concentration on unlicensed premises. It aims to restrict the availability of alcohol to reduce how much is consumed. This option aims to strike a balance between providing for some vibrancy in suburban centres at night while recognising and mitigating the risks of alcohol harm in suburban areas. We considered applying this option to the central city, but concluded that it would undermine the council's objectives for a vibrant central city and to provide for late night licensed premises in the area. There is some community support for reducing suburban trading hours, although the views are mixed. The Life in Christchurch survey found that 48% thought hours were too long for pubs, bars and nightclubs. For restaurants and cafes, 43% thought they were too long compared to 49%, about right. And for social and sports clubs, 56% of people thought hours were too long compared to 35% who thought they were about right. And there are differences between the views in some wards. For example, residents living in Riccarton, an area which there are many unlicensed premises, are less likely to support the current trading hours for pubs, bars, nightclubs and social sports clubs. These mixed views are an example of why we want to test these possible options further with the community. And our final two options here. So option E is a one-way door restriction. So under a one-way door restriction, people could not enter or re-enter in an unlicensed premises after a certain time, suggest 2 a.m. The rationale is to encourage people who are drinking late at night to stay within a licensed premise, which provides a supervised environment where staff can monitor levels of intoxication and behaviour. Also, harm can be reduced that arises from intoxicated people moving between venues late at night, and it limits people from leaving a venue to top up and then re-entering a venue, which was mentioned to us by the police. A restriction would be applied to all premises that hold an on-licence or a club licence. Other councils with a one-way door policy include Dunedin, 2:30am, Napier, 2am, Gisborne have one at 1am, and Timaru, 2am on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And finally, option F, this involves using tools other than a local alcohol policy to try and reduce alcohol-related harm. So these tools could include community collaboration, such as an alcohol accord, where parties agree to work together to promote the safe alcohol consumption. Alcohol bans, so we have some of these already, and these prohibit consumption in public places and aim to reduce things like litter and disorder. And there's also things like education initiatives for the city about safe and responsible drinking. So this is the final slide around the decision for council next week. So at the council meeting next week, we will seek your direction on the time frame for the remaining stages of an LAP. It is important that this decision is made at this stage so that council staff can plan and resource work accordingly, particularly in regards to community engagement and consultation. As a reminder, we're advising that decisions are made by one council rather than split over 2 council terms, and the 3 options provided allow for this. So the 3 options for council are: option 1, continue with work on LAP this council term, and that is the time frame that is outlined on the slide of what that would look like. This provides the council with an opportunity to adopt an LAP this term and is provided on the basis that this council asked us to commence work on an LAP. The timeframes and milestones for this option are possible, but there are some risks. For example, there is limited time to accommodate any unforeseen delays in the process. And we also know that it is likely to be a busy time for council and the public, with other council work streams happening across this same period. Option 2 is do the engagement on the issues and options and then pause work for the remainder of the council term. So this option would enable staff to continue to make progress on the work, building on the engagement to date, plus undertaking pre-consultation engagement on the issues and options, so we can present a draft policy to a new council in the new term. The engagement on the issues and options could also be moved out of the busy February-March timeframe that is on the screen and would be done at another suitable time, but before the end of the council term. This option would mean that the council would not make decisions on an LAP this term. And then option 3 is to simply pause work on an LAP now for the remainder of this council term. So this would mean that work is paused, and so no engagement on the issues and options that we've discussed today would go ahead, and the decisions for an LAP would be for the next council. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. I must say that's fantastic. Very clear presentation. So I commend you for that with both of you. It's very good. Okay, Andre, we have some questions.
Thank you. You've got 6 options there, A through F. My question here is, are we required to then go and test with the community all 6 of those options? Or when we come here in a couple of weeks' time, can we rule some of those in or out to be going and testing?
Yes, so we consider that the possible options that we've identified are aimed at addressing those issues that we've identified, and so they're not the only options available, and so others may think differently. But at this stage, we consider there is benefits to testing all of the options across the range of options to address the range of issues.
So council's decision doesn't have to test all 6 of those options, A through F, is I guess my question.
It doesn't have to, but our recommendation would be, if we are going to, I guess, go to the effort of engaging with the community in some depth on this, our preference would be to engage with them more.
But we're not required to.
So are you asking whether the final decision has to include them all, or just the engagement has to include them?
Well, engagement and testing, basically. Yeah, like the 6 options, A through F. Do we have to then go out? Do we have to do that with all of them, or can we go out and test just some of them? I guess
we can test what we want. We're suggesting testing the range on the basis that it's useful to find out what's not supported as well as what is supported, and that will help us refine our thinking for drafting the actual policy document.
Cool, thank you. Just a question here around no new licensed premises within 100 metres. This, like places of worship, for example. I mean, this, if someone really didn't want a bottle store near their home, they could essentially set up a place of worship from their home, register a new church and charity. So
It's new ones.
Yeah, but if someone didn't want something new, you can set up a church if you happen to live within 100 metres. It's much easier to set up that than it is to set up childhood centres and whatnot. But it'd just be good to clarify a point around that. On if you're going to test that being the case in the city centre, for example, that would mean you can't open a new bar restaurant near pretty much anywhere in the city because there's a childcare centre or a school within or a place of worship, like the cathedral, for example, it becomes a place of worship again. So it'd be good to know, we're actually going and testing that as a blanket potential rule, which would basically mean no new premises in the central city.
We're suggesting asking the question of, are these appropriate sites to identify as sensitive sites? So that's one of the things on which the community could feed back to us. That they might some people might feed back exactly your view that this is a reasonable constraint.
Just for us to be asking that in the first place, are you keen to basically not allow any new licensed premises in the? It'll be almost all of the city by the time you include all these different places. To even go and ask and test that question is likely not going to be received that well, and will potentially jeopardise what the intent of this actually is, which is to reduce harm. But you're not allowed to build it's a hell of a question to go and ask.
I think we're expecting there to be mixed views, but we're in the council's hands as to what you want to test with the community.
Okay. Andre, are you talking about bottle stores or restaurants?
Well, it just says licensed premises. That to me would suggest on and off licence.
I just note that one of the other options says in our suburban areas. So it could be the potential that we specify that one is for our suburban areas or outside the central city. Yeah.
Options could be refined based on the feedback that we receive, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, like in Hallsview, every off licence we've got is within 100 metres of a place of worship. just one other question. Do we hold data on what bottle stores currently open until 9 or what percentage open beyond? Do we hold that data as well? I know you got the data on who's got the licenses, but do you have the data on who actually utilises those?
That's very difficult to say. Yeah. So
Yeah.
a license will be given between certain times. It doesn't mean they have to be open during that time.
No,
So, and
and
it could
indeed
change
most-
day to day.
Yeah, and indeed most don't. It would just be good for us to know how many places or how many we're working with, so we know what difference it will make.
We do know the numbers, don't we?
Yeah.
The
We know that
numbers
we're
that
not of the
have
license.
a license and the particular hours. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be in the research report.
Well, yeah.
The research report has some data on those maximum hours, but we have some extra capacity at the moment where we could do a little bit of we wouldn't do it for every licence because we'd
No.
be there for 100 years, but
Yeah.
we could do some sampling around how often do they tend to be open and test that across different types of licences and areas of the city as well.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a fair few here. Tyler, please.
Just got a couple of quick ones, hopefully. I'm the councillor for Riccarton, so obviously that's a very big interest of mine within this area. Studentville, a lot of deprivation, actually, particularly around the places that are prevalent and off licences. So my first question is sort of related to Andre's one, where there is a risk of being bound by policy of which would probably be detrimental to local businesses, such as on licences. So if we're referencing, say, for example, Church Corner, which is literally named after the church, you've got a whole raft of on licences within that area. I'm wondering if there is any movement for flexibility before we go out for consultation, because there may be some submissions that come back that will probably be irrelevant, and therefore they may not be able to give the proper feedback for the other options because they're focused on those. So are we able to sort of hone in on the T's and C's before going out to the public on that?
So they're coming back to council for the next stage. If council were to choose to continue an LAP this term,
Yep.
the next time we'd be coming back to council would be in April to asking on an actual draft LAP
Yep.
itself. So if we were to add an extra step to refine those, that would make that would sort of squeeze the timetable for pushing for getting an LAP done this term.
Okay.
But I guess if we look at option 2 and if that was the council's view, that would enable us to do consultation on the issues and options later in the year out of the busy period and give us more bandwidth to refine if that is what the council wanted to do.
Okay. So yeah, and that's really good. The next question is around the more bespoke areas of the policy. So there's cultural differences between each city, obviously. For example, Dunedin, which I spent 7 years in, their big night was Thursday night. Friday night was for the 9-to-5ers, and Saturday night was where everyone started popping off. So, it's those things that I wanted to think about taking into account, and I know that the feedback would reflect that. But I really wanted to see, will the public be able to help you decide what the bespoke options are within those options that you've provided? For example, if they said, hey, 2 a.m. sounds really good for a closed door policy, we'd like it to be changed to 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, so with the options that we're planning on testing, we will ask around all those parts of the detail. We will ask questions around. So, for instance, is 2 a.m. too early? Too late? People will have options to say prefer 3 a.m. or 1 a.m. Those type of options. There will be also an opportunity to provide any like a free text commentary on that as well, to give their rationale.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Timothy.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the work you've done on this. I'm just wondering, you've got off licence, on licence, but now we have online. What's going to be covered with that? So are we going to be pushing for online purchase of alcohol and delivery of alcohol will be in line with the bottle stores? Because if it's not, then we're kind of killing ourselves, really, doing a whole lot of work, and those problem drinkers will still be able to get alcohol online. So I think that needs to be looked at. with regards to A, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Do we have any data, and it may be coming with the information you're going to give us, is there a rush between 9 and 11 in other areas where this has come in to suddenly get the booze before it all closes? And 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., is there any known amount of, is this a high purchase area? Because if we're going to pull the hours back to try and reduce the problems that are caused, could we look at is there an issue in the morning between 7? I mean, I don't think I've ever brought booze at between 7 and 9 a.m. My life hasn't been that bad, but I mean, is that an issue? I mean, it would be good to know that.
Yeah, and just to provide a little bit of commentary on that, so that was part of our consideration of hours. The reason why we chose the evening hours is that correlated with the data we received from police and through our through health around when harm happens. And so obviously it won't be a surprise that it happens in those late hours of the evening, early hours of the morning sort of time, rather than opposed to,
In the previous liaison with public, that there has been the comment that when we have an established off-licence or off-licence generally, or a supermarket close to a school, it is a bad look being able to purchase alcohol that early in the morning when kids are going to school, etc. So that's just a comment and something that we could look at in that. And I guess B relates to A with regards to freeze and areas of deprivation, etc., not allowing new licensing, etc. People will travel, and so if you have one bottle store open till 11 p.m. and another open till 9, if people are really desperate for a drink, they will travel, and so that will be the same. If an area has no or fewer bottle stores, people will travel. So I think whatever we do, we have to make it citywide. That's a personal opinion, but I think put that in the information asked to the public. And with regards to, and Andre brought it up with regards to how close to, etc., facilities, I think the reverse has to be as well. He mentioned that someone could start a church in their front room type of thing. Rehabs, etc., if they are established, but there should be a limit to the distance those types of places could be established to an on-licence, off-licence, etc. I think it's a two-way, because you can't establish, say, an early learning centre and then complain about the bottle store down the road. I think we have to look at both. And I know that in your information, and my computer's just died, about things that are being left outside of the scope, and maybe the district plan is one of those, but maybe that's something we've got to work around. So, for instance, we have a shopping centre, we have an off-licence, on-licence restaurant or whatever, and then someone starts an early learning centre around the corner, or a rehab centre, or a church. I don't think they have the right then to complain about the off-licence, on-licence. So how we look at that?
So what we are proposing is for new licences only. So if they're already established, it wouldn't.
But it's also for those early learning centres, etc. That are we going to restrict them to be setting up? It's a two-way street. As I see it, because we then deal with the complaints from those organisations. But it's like moving by the airport and then complaining about the planes. It's got to be a two-way. But just thinking about that. And the final question, and I know you'll be pleased for me to finish. Prosecutions. This isn't the thing that's going to solve the problem. So it'd be really good to know about prosecutions, because some of the feedback I've heard from my ratepayers is, it seems that breaches and off licences, especially, and on licence with the drunks, etc., because there is a requirement to ensure that they are not serving alcohol intoxicated people. And bottle stores about age, etc., and restrictions on serving and selling alcohol to underage, etc. But it'll be good to get some understanding and some knowledge on the prosecution process, and what have been the fines or the punishments to those that have breached those whether on or off license, so we can get it. Because if it is a process that seems to be, and the comment I've had from a couple of people is, it's just like a wet bus ticket. But I know that's not the case. But I think when we go out to the public, it'll be really good to have some of that information and backed up by the police. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Please.
Thank you. Really liking what I'm seeing in this, so thank you for your work on this. I'm keen for us to head out and hear from the public their thoughts on these different options. I think you've got a good set of options there, and I pick up on Councillor Scandrett there. Reverse sensitivity is, I guess, kind of what we're talking about there, and that would be good for us as a council to try and get our head around how we can cover that off with district plan and that sort of thing to make sure we don't sort of tie our hands down the track and have problems being chucked backwards to try and close places down. But thinking about option B and the temporary freeze on new licence application in high deprivation areas, in some of these high deprivation areas, is there also, I guess, a way to look at that as being potential expansion to perhaps a sinking lid, and having a limit on the number of licensed premises in the highly deprived areas that we can sort of steadily work towards, rather than it just being a freeze of what we're currently at, and that's where it is. Just I want to check and see if there is an option to perhaps have that option to reduce sort of going forward, but that's a sort of thought I've had. And otherwise, I'm really keen to hear from the public on what their thoughts are on these options, and then for us to fine tune a potential LAP and make sure we get it right, so that we can get it in place, because we need this to protect our communities.
Jake, please.
Thank you. I had my hand up early, Kelly, not being unfairly disadvantaged. Hey, option A. I mean, I suspect it's option A for a reason. It almost would seem negligent if we ended up with an LAP that didn't shave a couple of hours off, or actually effectively 1 hour off license bottle stores. In fact, if that's the only thing we did, then I think that would be a game changer in reducing alcohol harm in Christchurch. Option D, though, just on the sort of less popular options, closing the closing the suburban on licences earlier, would there be a dual benefit there in terms of pokey gaming? In terms of if a suburban pub is closing a couple hours earlier, is there any evidence or research about the impact that might have with the reduced gameplay?
I presume the same principle applies in terms of longer hours, more consumption, more
Consumption
ability
of booze,
to game.
consumption of
Yeah,
gambling.
I don't have the details of any
Not
research.
aware of any suburban pubs you can buy pokies in 2 in the morning these days.
Well done, Jake. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you're looking for a steer, for me, option 1, I think, should be pursued. I think we'll always be busy, and I think that we should forge ahead with this. The city's been waiting a long time to have these things clarified, so I'll put my voice to that. My question really is about option F, having a close family member, high-functioning family member whose life has literally been destroyed by alcohol. It amazes me that despite convictions and spending time in prison as a result of drinking-related offences, that he's able to still purchase alcohol. Is there any mechanism that we can pursue that stops people who are at the extremes of alcohol harm in their own lives from purchasing alcohol? I mean, it's quite draconian in some respects, but we're talking about individuals who have really gone off the deep end, and it would seem to me that we could make a significant difference in the community for those most dramatically affected. I just don't understand why we couldn't do that, or whether it's maybe a national government legislation, because people can obviously go in to licensed premises and have a meal, and that it's heavily regulated. Their behaviour is regulated. They can't be served if they're drinking, but if they go into a bottle store, what's the difference there?
It's not supervised drinking, obviously. We're for an off license.
Yeah. When people have convictions as a result of alcohol harm, I don't understand how it is that we still allow them to purchase alcohol. It makes no sense to me. Is there any mechanism that you can see?
So that would certainly be beyond anything that a local alcohol policy would be able to do. I think the council was then restricted to, what the things that it has control of. I think probably some of those things that you're suggesting are probably broader than what the council would be able to potentially do in terms of regulating. That would certainly.
Just in terms of our sort of local area, if we were to look at, do we have any control over online purchases in our area? Who qualifies to purchase? Could we make some kind of license to buy, or is that well outside the scope?
As the law presently stands, under the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act, there is no provision to stop people drinking or being supplied with alcohol. In terms of people that have been convicted, it may well be that the courts will impose a supervision order which could put conditions on their ability to be supplied with alcohol, but enforcing that would be very, very difficult. But yeah, I understand your problem, but at the moment it would be a national law change. It would have to be the government be leading that. And in terms of the supply by means of external, then it would be effectively at the moment as I understand it, through the supermarkets, they enforce now that they will not drop off liquor unless a person over the age of 18 is there, and that's the only restriction.
So I'm just intrigued about this option F. Was there anything in particular you had in mind in terms of that option F?
We haven't explored any of the option F options in any depth at this stage. It's sort of there to so with option F, one thing to point out is that they can be used instead of or alongside an LAP. So they're not. It's not necessarily one or the other. It can be with as well. But we haven't looked at it in any detail about what those would look like at this stage. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Celeste, please.
My question is just around option C in regards to the no new licensed premises. I'm particularly interested in the on licenses. I'm reasonably comfortable that 100 metres is quite a short distance. However, is there an ability to sort of look at that as not, because if you talk about suburban areas, is there a differentiation between, say, the commercial area and suburban areas? Because if you've got an area that is potentially going through a period of revitalisation, what you've got is some churches are actually within a commercially zoned area currently because they're utilising spaces that are currently empty. But as we go through that period of transformation, I would argue that it is appropriate for some of those on licences to then be situated in that space, and they might not be able to do that if we are too vague in how we word that. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't have a perverse kind of consequence, and that we obviously want to limit harm, but we also want to encourage those that are, supporting the revitalisation of area through the development of the commercially zoned area to allow, to make sure that those plans can progress. So just not sure what can go on the wording there to make sure that we don't have that issue.
The actual Act provides that an alcohol policy may provide differently for different parts of its district. It also may apply to only one part of its district, and it also may apply to different licences. So it may have different implications for each licence.
Right.
So we have quite a large or quite a wide sphere that we could look at.
Yeah, thank you.
Samuel.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions. So I tend to agree with Andre in terms of there's, potentially some unintended consequence of some of the policy stuff here. And I just worry we're rushing it, but that will be no surprise to anyone, given I've said that before. I'm just keen, I was just looking at the draft report for next week, and so obviously you're recommending to proceed before the election. I just wondered how much work, and I couldn't see in there sort of references to, on these specific options, the peer review we've done with Auckland in terms of a sort of a comparator. Have we done detailed work, or will that be a supplementary to the report?
Just to note on the report, it is a draft, and we sought permission from the Chief Executive to sign that off after this briefing session, precisely because we wanted to get feedback on the recommendations in that report, so it is a draft. In terms of
presumably, sorry, can I just clarify that? Presumably, though, because I would hate to think that a staff recommendation has changed based on council feedback, we want independent advice. So is that recommendation likely to change? Because unless I've got it wrong, it shouldn't change based off council feedback.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. It should be something that's debated at a council meeting around a council table.
All right.
Yeah. So just so I'm clear though, the recommendation won't change based off feedback today. It'll be independent council advice.
So I think the delay was also giving some opportunity if there was more information that needed to go into the report or more clarity that needed to go into the report.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Cool.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. Now, Sarah.
Oh, no, haven't finished. Sorry. So the other part of that question was around the peer review of Auckland. I just couldn't see it in there.
Yes. So we are in contact with our Auckland colleagues about their LAP. It's only been fully enforced since December, so it's still very early stages of their one. Out of interest, they've reported that they haven't had any issues yet with their compliance with their policy, and overall they're reporting that reception to theirs has been good, and they're currently working on how they might evaluate their LAP for reporting in the future. So that's the other things that we could consider as well.
Okay, but in terms of the specific options, so we've just talked through options A, B, right through to F.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm kind of keen, because again, it's just reinforcing the nervousness I have about rushing it, is, and I'm all up for changes. I quite like what Auckland have done, but just around some of the interpretations, like the team have mentioned around the 100 metres and that, have we peer reviewed that work with anyone else that's actually operating it at the moment? And if so, can that be added to the report for next week?
Have we peer reviewed what?
So I don't think we have peer reviewed the specifically with the councils on that particular policy. We have looked at, so there are 42 LAPs across the country. We have looked at a range of those who implement these types of policies. The ones that we're proposing today are found in other LAPs across the country. In particular, in regards to Auckland, two of the options that were put forward, proposed options that are put forward today, are very similar to what Auckland City Council is doing, which are around the temporary freeze on new licences and reducing the trading hours to 9 p.m. So that very much aligns with what Auckland is doing.
Yep. So in terms of the other options, I guess where I'm trying to get to is in the report for next week, it's really helpful to understand how these all are operating and the challenges or the advantages with them actually in practice. Because and again, it'd be no surprise, the nervousness I've got is, potentially trying all this new stuff, rushing the decision, and then having unintended consequences. So I'd really like to understand how it's operating. So can we have that in the report?
So some of that would come back in the final decision. So some of it may not be ready for next week. but it would come back with further information at a subsequent report.
I just one other thing to note is that we have done research on the effectiveness of a range of LAP tools that are out there. In terms of that research, there isn't a lot of it generally, and in terms of the results of that research, the results tend to come back quite mixed, so there isn't a strong evidence base to sort of lean into in that space for us.
Okay, and just sorry, Phil, last one is just around the timing. So, obviously we've got hearings panels and things like that, which is all good. So the report talks about like the draft annual plan and all of obviously those other challenges. So is there any work that will be bumped to do this ahead of the election, or will it be in addition to what's already on the schedule?
It's currently on the schedule as it is. So Helen,
Councillor, in last week's digest, we sent through the map of all the work that's currently in train and underway. There's nothing, and I'm looking at colleagues for confirmation, that is currently on the schedule that would be bumped. It may be that if anything new comes up, or there's other anything unexpected, that it may cause congestion.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yep, you're done. Sarah's done. Yanni, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done on it. I was just keen to know what the feedback was from the clubs. Have we got specific feedback?
From the sports clubs.
From sports clubs, but also the working men's clubs or the chartered clubs.
Yes, so we met with Clubs New Zealand and 3 representative general managers from Christchurch clubs, Hornby, Papanui, and New Brighton in particular, that came and met with us. They were very supportive of the conversation, and we're very thankful that they were brought in to speak to us. The information that they shared around the range of options that LAP can provide or can put conditions in, a number of them, they felt under their operating place, the way that they operate would not likely impact them because they were already operating within them. But they do have some concerns and would like to consider it further if there was anything put in around sensitive sites. And that has impacted, if you don't mind me saying, the way in which the team have considered whether or not a freeze or sensitive sites distances should be implemented retrospectively on existing licences, or whether it should actually be put on any new licences. At this point in time, we're looking to test those ideas on new licence applications, not existing premises. That would then secure the existing clubs in the spaces that they're in at the moment. Noting that one of the key things that they asked us to take into consideration or be aware of as a project team is that they consider themselves places for the community as well, and they operate differently. They also have a different operating code of conduct for members, and members can be held to that, and they can be kicked out if they don't adhere to it. But likewise, that's two-way. So the way that a club treats their members also comes into consideration. If there are any conflicts of interest or issues that happen within the club, then that's taken to the club committee and considered as well. So it's slightly different operating. Dependent on what we were looking to test, they would want further discussion.
And just to be clear, were all the clubs invited, and they're the ones
All
that
of the clubs were invited.
attended?
They were the ones that were available at the time.
Was there-
and they brought Clubs New Zealand with them.
Right. And was there any opportunity for the clubs that couldn't attend to provide sort of written feedback or concerns?
They were provided with all of the meeting notes and all of the communications between those that came. So if they wanted to, we would have received information.
So any concern around special licences for clubs? Because that was one area that's been raised with me.
That was raised with us, was considerations around putting a cap on the number of special licences that a club could have, and just for others to understand that if there are special functions that are held within a working men's club, they often need to apply for a special licence over and above their club operating licence to extend the time period that they can sell alcohol for other reasons. I won't get too much into it. Gary is here will have more knowledge than I do, but it was expressed to us that there would be concerns if there was a cap on the number of special licences that could be applied for within a year.
Fair comment. Thank you. Thank you. Now, this is very interesting and it's good and everyone's having the input. We've got 4 more to go, so I'm keen to just get to the end of it. Tyrone, please.
Oh, got it. So is there any way to, I mean, it sort of seems like a bit of a one-size-fits-all policy. Is there any way to exclude Banks Peninsula Ward entirely from the process completely? Because it sort of seems to be a solution that's looking for a problem when it comes to Banks Peninsula.
Yeah, some might say you're the solution. No, whatever.
As I said previously, Section 75 of the Act does allow you to restrict it to districts within your area. So you can exclude areas if you so wish.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that to be considered because there's already like 9 o'clock off licence closing in Littleton and sufficient social, pressure for things to operate well. And I don't think street violence after hours is a problem in Akaroa at the moment, unless when Phil's there.
I think at this stage it's a bit early to take that.
Thank you very much. Victoria, please.
Thank you. Just one point of clarification, doubling back to a comment made from my colleague Councillor Scandrett around the online purchases. Is online alcohol purchases in scope or out of scope of this policy?
So just to clarify, so in terms of online, there are 2 ways, I guess, without getting into too much detail, to 2 licenses that you can do, that people can buy online. So you can off-license can sell that way, or people can have a special remote license. Our position, and that reflects the views of the stakeholders that we've talked to date, is that issues regarding sort of remote sales of alcohol is best addressed through central government regulation rather than through local alcohol policy. I would have to check, but I think it would be quite rare for remote licences to be part of other local alcohol policies in the country.
Well, I'll just be grateful if we can check that, please, for clarification. Thank you.
Okay, and second last, we've got Melanie.
It makes sense to me to consult on all the options you've provided because they're all aimed at reducing alcohol harm. I was just wondering if there's any risks if council was to decide not to consult on an option based on the engagement we've done without going out to full consultation on it. In other words, sort of making a decision about ruling something out without consulting on it and whether we would appear to be biased in our decision around the LAP overall.
My view is that if we ruled something out, then we could be challenged on the basis of predetermination. So I think we're best to go back on all options and test everything that's out
there. Just quickly, I don't think we sort of covered the liquor store or bottle store prevalences. And one of the key issues, and you've probably noticed this, was that the community don't have much of a say. Will have little power when trying to stop liquor stores from being able to establish in the area. Is there anything within this policy that would help provide community input and rebalance the power, I guess, with the community to be able to go against new off-licences?
So local alcohol policy generally, one of the reasons why we're trying to seek community views is to get that sort of, to get the feedback so they can contribute into the policy. And so one of the options that we've put forward regarding, for instance, the proximity around sensitive sites is in response to community views to have more say.
So just to be clear, the committee who obviously oversee the licences and look within the policy, if it is within the policy and then the community say they don't want it, that's the sticking point. So if something's within the policy and it's fine, even if the community don't like it, it will still get pushed through. So the question I've got is, how would the community have, I guess, more of a rebalance in terms of them not wanting it on a street corner, particularly when there's high deprivation? Are you saying that this is going to back their argument to be able to push forward to help restrict those off licences?
The changes in the Act that took place last year have made it easier for people to object. So they're not. It's got rid of the cross-examination and the.
That's what I was after. Yeah. Okay.
So it's not such a frightening experience as it may have been previously. So there's going to be, and that was a reason why a lot of people didn't object, because of that element of cross-examination and being put up through the ringer by some experienced lawyer or advocate. So
that's exactly what I was after. Thank you so much. And we've got 6 months to make this decision, correct? So this goes all the way to August. We make the decision, we listen to the consultations, hearings panels, and then we make the decision in August if we choose to go forward with it. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for their questions, and thank you so much for the report. It's fantastic answers as well. Okey-doke. So we will move on to welcome Ike and Helena, who are here to discuss the council submission on the Resource Management Amendment Bill.